So what we're going to go through today is if statements. So we'll do if and else statements. So the idea is if you can run the same piece of code over and over again, maybe you want a different result based on what's in the data. So this first example that we're going to do, first, as always, we'll do it in Sheets. There's an if formula in Google Sheets. So if, and it has a really helpful how to do it. So you have the expression, which in this case you can say if A2 equals foo. So what we want to do is have all of James's sales. So here's a list of the data with the sales and the sales rep. So we can say if A2, in this case this will be D6, is equal to, and then in Google Sheets you always have to have double quotation marks. In Google Apps script or JavaScript, it doesn't matter. It can be single or a backtick. But so we want to have if James. So if D6 is James, what we want to do is show in this section. So if the value is true, we want to show this sale. And if it's not true, then we want to show nothing. So just 0 is fine. And then we'll close it off and drag it out. Works fine. So then we can do the same thing, except we want to say Daniel's sales. So here we'll say Daniel. Oh, double quotation marks needed. So if D6 is equal to Daniel, so the string, then give me the value of C6, otherwise give me nothing. And works as expected. So the way we do this in Google Apps script, as always, we open our script editor, and I'll bring this to the side so that we can see things side by side. I'll just get rid of last week's functions, rename it to lesson 4. Okay, so here is our code. We've just got the example code. To make this easier to see, I might just hide these columns for the moment so we can see everything side by side. So what we want to know is what are James's sales, the same way that we did it with with the formulas. So we want to say, so this function that we're writing should have a name like if get sales reps sales. So then it says what it's doing and it's easy to understand. So we can call it get sales reps sales. Again, this has got an S on it because we're expecting to get an array. The input will be this set of sales and also this set of sales reps. So we're going to work with, it's going to be the whole thing. So we're going to work with a two-dimensional array, which we've worked with previously, so we should be okay. But this is the first time we're actually going to take advantage of this two-dimensional array. So we've got our data coming in, and then we'll have the sales rep's name, which in this case, James for the first one. And that's it. So Google Apps Script doesn't know, or Google Sheets doesn't know this function because we haven't written it yet. Now we'll write it. So function name, and then sales data. And the second input parameter for this function will be sales rep name. Okay, and then curly brackets to say this is the code we're going to put in. I like to start with what we're returning. So what we're going to return is sales rep sales. That makes sense because this function is getting the sales rep sales, so we're going to return sales rep sales. We'll initialize this with a array. So let sales rep sales equal an empty array. And now we're going to write our code. So the first thing we'll save it, so then at least this knows what we're doing. It should be an empty array, so we should get nothing at all when it decides to load. But what we want to do is we want to loop through this array of ranges, and check to see who the sales rep is. So we're going to write a for loop like we did last time. For let I equals 0, so this is our initializing number, so it starts with 0, and then we're going to run it so long as for the amount of times that the array is long. So this array will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 long. So we can either say 5, or if we want to be clever, we can take this array and look at the length. So an array.length is equal to how many items are in that array. Okay, and then, oh, we made a mistake here. It's not a comma, it is a semicolon. Semicolon, and what do we want to do once we've run this loop? We want to I++, so we want to add 1 to I. And then for our code loop, what we want to do is say sales data. We want to find out who the sales rep is here. So I can't remember, or I do, but we'll just check to see what structure this data is in first. So before we do our loop, we'll run a logger.log, and we'll test the data just to make sure we know how this data is coming in. So we can save this. I don't know why this is hung. Let's put this back in. See if it loads this time. Reference does not exist. Pretty sure it does. Not sure which reference it's talking about, but sales rep sales does exist. Get sales rep sales does exist. Sales data, sales rep name. Let's also logger.log the sales rep name while we're here. Save it. Let's just comment out this for loop at the moment. So what we've done is if you put 2 backslashes in, you comment the code so it doesn't run anything. It's actually useful for describing what it is you're doing. So in this case, we might put a description to say loop through sales data to find sales rep. And then people will actually know what this loop is doing. But at the moment, we're just going to comment it out because I don't want it to run. Okay, save it. Reference does not exist. It might be because we're sending back nothing. So let's try send back a number 9. Yeah, it works. It's just because we're sending nothing. But what we actually want to run is the executions. We want to see what this logger is getting. So we can see our executions here. And we've got, as we expected, an array. And then each item in the array is an array of 2, because this is the data that we're sending through. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, and each row has 2 columns. So this data is so this will represent the entire thing, the entire object, the entire array, and then each item will show the row. So this is row 1, column 1, row 2, column 2, row 2, column 1, row 2, column 2. Hope that makes sense, but that's what we're looking at. So we've also got a string this is our secondary input, which is the sales rep name. It's coming through as a string, so these are the same. That's what we want. So what we want to do here is we want to loop through each of our sales data records, and we want to push the sale onto this empty array if it is James. So the way we do that, we can say sales rep sales dot push to push an item onto the array, and what we want to push onto the array is sales data, and it is the, as we see here, the first item in the first array. So it'll be 0, 0, 0, 0. And because we want to loop through this multiple times, instead of saying 0 for this first bit, which identifies, is it, so 0, 1, 2, 3, we want to say I, because this will increase. So then the first time we run it will be 0, second time 1, third time 2, the fourth time 3, and so on. So what this will do now is push every single sale onto this array. So if we save it, we'll see it's copying all of them. But we don't want it to do all of them. What we want to do is check to see if the sales rep matches the sales rep data we have. So what we can do is say if with parentheses, and then whatever we put in this parentheses should be a true or a false statement. It's also called a boolean. The same way as we said in this hidden unhide. The same way here we said if this first item should be a logical expression, which means is it true or is it false, and then it'll give us a value of true, value of false. This in a similar way will do. This should be a logical expression, true or false. So we can say it does sales rep name. Is it the same as the sales data I and then 1 for the second item in the row? Because then we'll say I, which is the first time we run it, is this array of 2. And we want the second item because that is the sales rep name. So the way we check for equivalency in JavaScript, there's a couple of ways, but the main way we're going to learn, or the only way we're going to learn, is a triple equals. So if sales rep name is equal to sales data I 1 here, because we want the second item in the array, James. So if James is equal to James, which in this case is true, we want to do a set of code. And the way we say which code do we want to run is we will put curly brackets around it. So curly brackets, and whatever's in this code space is what's going to run. So what we want to do is push it, get rid of these empty lines. So now our code reads, if the sales rep name is equal to the sales data I, in the first case is 0, 1, so then 0, and then we want the second item, which is 1. Then we want to push what is the first item in the array. Get rid of these extra lines. Actually, before we get rid of the loggers, we'll save it and run it. And see if we've done everything correctly. Cool. So we have, now we've only pushed the sales that are that match James. So it's only given us 3 sales, and it's not put 0 in the place of no sales. That's okay at the moment. Still serves our purpose. So that's fine. We're going to learn else what to do in the case of a false a little bit later on. But for now, this works as we want it to. So we'll get rid of our extra bits. We'll fix our code formatting just so it's readable. So you can see this code block includes everything in here. That's why it's indented. And then this code block, So if, and then the code block, it's indented as well, so you can see that this is part of what we do if this if statement runs. Then we return the sales rep, and we're going to call this function again for a second time with a different import. So instead of saying James, we're going to say Daniel. We'll write it out again. So get sales rep sales, and then the input is the data, comma, and then the second input should be the sales rep name, Daniel. Unknown function, get sales rep sales. That's odd. Because it's reps. Actually, probably more accurately should be rep. So we're going to change the name of the function and update it here. Okay. So now we can see James's sales, Daniel's sales separated. Exactly what we want. So let's move on. Okay, unhide these rows. So now we're doing the same thing, except instead of pushing it to an array like we did here, we're just going to add it to the total. So this function will use a lot of the same code as previously. So let's just copy it to start with. Okay, so we need a new name for this. So we can get, so we want the sales reps sales total. So we can call it get sales rep total. Total makes sense in this case, not a zero, not a s at the end, because we only want one number to come back. We don't want an array. So I think this name makes sense. So what we want to do is call this function, give it the data as the same as before, give it the salesperson's name, James, and we want to do the same for Daniel. So we'll just write these now, except, oh, I've copied and pasted that, so it's got the wrong data set. So correct that, and then we'll update the name to Daniel. Remember, in string, Google Sheets requires it to be in a double quotation marks, and then Google Sheets can be single. So this example here is in double, can be in single, doesn't matter. Okay, so now we've got that running. We want get sales rep total, get sales rep total. At the moment we're returning an array. We don't want it to be an array. We need to rename this. So this should be sales rep total, and we should start it off as a number, and we're going to return sales rep total. So this part of the code still works, because what we want to do is loop through this data and do something different depending on the sales rep name. So in the same case, we're going to say if the sales rep name is equal to James, sales rep name, which is the input here, Daniel, is equal to sales data, which we saw here. This is our example sales data. So we know in each item in the array, the second item in the array is the sales name. So sales number, sales rep name. And it's the same data structure. So this still works fine. But instead of pushing it, we don't want to push it. What we want to do is add the value to this total. So we can say, so we've already declared it. So now we can access it by just saying sales rep total equals the current value plus sales data, we'll copy this, the first item in the array, not the second. So now each time we loop through, we say take the sales rep total. It should be equal to the current total, which in this case is 0 the first time, plus the new sale. The second time we run it, it'll have, it might have increased this number. So say this number is now 60. We'll say sales rep total equals 60 plus the new one. The other way to write this, which is much easier, is we'll say plus equals. These are the same thing. Okay, we'll save this because this should run. Great, got our totals. We can check it here. Check it here. Actually, I forgot to run this in Sheets, so I'll show you how to do that now. A little bit out of order. Unhide these columns. So if we were doing this in Sheets, we would say sum if, so conditional sum across a range, which is the same thing as did in the Google Apps script. So our range in this case is, so our range that we're going to test it with the criteria is this range. And then the criteria we're going to set is, it should be equal to James. And the sum we're going to add is this range here. And then it's going to be the same thing for Daniel, except that it should be Daniel. We'll just copy the formatting. We'll check our working. Got the same answer. It's a good sign. Okay, last one. What we're going to do here is an if else. So in the same way, this if statement in Google Sheets has a if this is the case, do this, otherwise do this, we will say else. That's what we're going to write now, which is a little bit different in JavaScript. So first, to do it in Google Sheets, just make this bigger. Okay, so the commission rules here is if it's less than 50 euros, it's 10%. If it's more than 50 euros, it's 20%. That's the commission rules, and we want to work out what the commission is for each of these sales. So what we can say is if, and we have our logical expression, which should be C30 is if it's more than 50 euros, so 50, because remember this is just a formatted number, so then what is actually in this cell is 50, not 50 euros. Next thing we want to say, so if C30 is more than 50, we want to say the commission should be C30 times 20%. If else, it should be C30 times 10%. We need to lock these figures, these commission figures. And then drag it down. So now we've got, so 36 is less than 50, so the commission is 10%, €3.60. It seems right to me. And then 54 euros is more than 50, so it should be 20%, €10.80. So this is how we do it in Google Sheets. Now we're going to do it in Google Apps Script. Okay, so because my I'm just going to rearrange this screen. Last time we had an issue where my video covered up the code, which is not very helpful. So now we shouldn't have this problem. Okay, so what we're going to do now is get the same thing as here. We're going to work out the commission, but in Google Script. So our formula should be get commission from sales, or of sales, maybe. It's not a huge distinction. I'm just trying to, the only reason we name it a specific thing is so that people know what it does from the name. So what this does is it should have an input of the range, and then the second input should be the less than 50 commission, and then the third input here should be the more than 50 commission. Obviously it doesn't know this name because we haven't written the function yet, and now we'll write the function. Okay. Function, name of function, in parentheses, the first, all the parameters for this function. So the parameters in our case is sales data. Okay, and then second item will be less than 50 commish. And the third item should be more than 50 commission. So these variable names are a bit too long. It's okay because it's contributing to the documentation of what this does. So we can write comments like we saw before on what this does. So it'll be get sales data, get commission from sales data. We can say it takes two commission amounts. Or we could write it much better, and this is a little bit off topic, but you can write a longer one like this, and you can actually put your parameters here. So let's say sales data, and then what it actually means, and then we can add to the autocomplete. So the autocomplete is the same as what you would get in Sheets. So if you look at this if function, there's some information, and we can write what our actual function should do in the same way. Anyway, it's off topic, we won't get into it. So curly brackets, and then what is this function actually going to do? So what our function should do is loop through the sales data and then return the commission. So so we want it to return an array. So we'll say return commission amounts. And we'll initialize this as an empty array because it will be an array. We want the same amount of items in this array as there are sales data, so it should be an array. And then we're going to loop through our sales data again. So for let I equals 0, starting at 0. Oops. Semicolon. We want to run this for as many items as we get in the sales data. So I should be less than sales data dot length. And then after each loop, we want to increase I by 1. So whatever we put in this loop, we're going to run as many times as we have sales data. So each time we have sales data, we want to push that to the commission amount with the correct commission. So what we're going to do is create a new variable called commission. Commission percentage. And we're going to set it as 0. And so what we're going to do is we're going to push the commission amount. So commission amount dot push will take an item, which will be again sales data I, and then 0. because we're going to have a similar structure as okay, we can check the structure because it's a new thing. Logger.log. Let's have a look at our sales data and see what structure it comes in. This should be a two-dimensional array with one item in each of the array. I've got an error here. I'm just going to give it a number so that it actually runs. Read our error. Sales data is not defined. Line 37. So sales data is not defined here because I've put this as a capital incorrectly. But it's a good example of error because you can see exactly where your problem is. So here the error says it's in line 37. We can see line 37 has sales data. Now it should work. So we'll save it, run this again. Sometimes you have to remove it and then run it again for it to actually reread it. Let's read the error again. Sales data, again, I've used capital. You can also tell that there's an error because this is in black, and if it's a variable it should be in blue. So light blue here. Okay. Okay, so we've got one extra item because I've initialized this as 9. Let's remove that. And we'll fix this formatting as well. So what we're doing currently is we're saying commission amounts push the sales data each item. But what we actually wanted to do was view the stack driver logs for not get sales rep but get commission of sales. And here is our two-dimensional array, and each item only has one item. Each item is an array with one item. Okay, so what we want to do is times the sales data by the commission percentage, which we can do like this. And because it's 0 at the moment, all of these will go to 0. Anything times 0 equals 0, obviously. But what we want to do is say, let's change this commission percentage depending on what we get as these inputs. So we'll say if the sales data is if it's more than 50, what we want to do is say if it's more than 50, we want the commission percentage to equal more than 50 commission. So now, if we save it, we'll see if it's more than 50, we get the correct amounts. We're just going to make these formats financial so that they look right. So we're getting the correct amount if it's over 50. But we don't currently have else. What do we do else? So we could do another if statement to say if it's less than 50, do this. Otherwise, we can just write else, have another code block, and then whatever we put in here is going to run if this is false. So if this is true, we're going to run the first code block. Else, we're going to run the second code block. So the commission percentage this time, I've spelled it wrong. You can tell by it's black, is equal to less than 50 commission. Now it's running right. We'll clean this up, get rid of our logger, and then we have a working function. Great. Okay, well the exercise is in the description, so you can do it there. But as always, let me know if you have any problems with it.